Now you know. To eat good food is to be close to God. See? You know what they say? To know God, to have the knowing.
Knowledge.
Knowledge? See, the knowledge of God is the bread of angels. I'm never sure what that means, but it's true anyway.
Coming up, a film and food review of the heavenly film Big Night. Welcome everyone to the Film and Food Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Roberts, and thank you again for joining us for episode 9. This may be the most excited I've been about an episode of our podcast, and you are in for a treat this episode. But before I introduce this episode, I wanted to say a big welcome to the Film and Food Podcast. We celebrate all things culinary and cinematic in film, so if you're a foodie or a cinephile or both, like me, this is the podcast for you. We produce film and food review episodes where we give a comprehensive review of a great foodie film, plus give you a film-inspired recipe or two to try at home. We also do quick bite episodes where we catch you up on great film and television from the past and present. There's so much content for you to dive into. Make sure you check out our other episodes and subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you so much for all of your support. We really appreciate everybody who subscribes and listens and supports our show. Okay, let's dive into talking about this week's episode. This week's episode is what we call a film and food review, and let me quickly explain what that means in case you don't know. We review a film for both its culinary and cinematic quality, and we do this in 3 different segments. First, we look at the menu, giving an introduction and some initial thoughts. Then it's time to dine. This is where we dive into the meat of the film, as it were, going into our spoiler review of the movie and breaking it down into our highlights, our favourite film moments and our favourite food moments, plus any discussion about themes or stories along the way. Then finally, we give our compliments to the chef, where we give our concluding thoughts and ratings. But wait, there's more! Every film and food review, we give you a recipe inspired by that film to try at home. Each recipe has been tried and tested by me. Every film and food review, we have a guest that comes on to the show, and this is what I'm so excited about. This episode, we're so excited to have Nick Charlie Key from the Fantastic History of Food podcast coming on to chat about the 1996 film Big Night. Nick Charlie Key is a best-selling author, and he's the host of this incredible podcast that I'm sure every single person listening to this show will find intriguing, exciting, and informative, and it's a must-listen for anyone who loves food. Nick's podcast is full of amazing, intriguing, quirky, unique, and fascinating stories from history, all about food, and they are just a delight to listen to. They're fabulously produced, and we can't recommend his podcast enough. And so without further ado, we're so excited to share with you this week's episode, our film and food review of the 1996 film Big Night. Here's our conversation. Well, I'm so excited to welcome the host of the Fantastic History of Food podcast onto the show, Nick Charlie Key.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for coming and taking the time. It's so great to have you on the show. What I wanted to ask you first is, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, great. Actually, like I was saying to you just off air earlier, this is a good sort of mashup of my passions. So in my day job, I'm a videographer, film editor, that kind of thing. So I'm very interested in movies and films, but also outside of that, as a hobby, I am very much into food itself. I actually have a published cookbook as well that got released a couple of years ago.
Awesome.
Here in South Africa, where I live in Cape Town, and so it really is a good amalgamation of all the things that I kind of love, and so that's also what led into my podcast about food, is because I also actually used to be a teacher. I studied to be a teacher way back in the day, and I taught for 4 years, and I taught history as the subject, and so kind of bringing history and food together made sense for me as my podcast. But now getting onto your podcast, it's like the other 2 things that I love coming together. So it really is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, that's so cool. I did ancient history in my schooling growing up, and at
Yeah.
13 I wanted to be an archaeologist. I don't know if that counts as history, but I've always been interested in that. I think that's why I've loved your podcast, because food and history, and they're
Mm,
just, I feel like they are perfect little bite-sized episodes. You could just squeeze
yeah.
them in any time of the day, which I
Yeah.
actually intentionally had the pun in there.
Very
But
good.
so it's awesome. I'm so excited to chat movies.
Yeah.
So you told me about your show. Tell me about your interest in movies. I hate being asked
Mm,
what my favorite film is, but I'm going to
yeah.
ask you, and you can give me more
Yeah.
than one if you want. But what's sort of your taste in movies like?
Oh man. The problem with this is it always comes across sounding so snobby if you go, well, I actually have quite a varied taste in movies. But I think the thing
Yeah.
is, growing up, I think I don't know. My mom used to have a friend who owned a video store when I was a kid. Still, when we used to watch on tapes. So I mean, that gives a bit of my age away. But we used to kind of just get free movies from this video store all the time. I used to watch a whole bunch of stuff, but I used to be really into musicals as a kid, which is quite a weird thing. But I used to love Grease, and I used to love Sound of Music. Um, as a kid, I used to rewatch those a lot. But I also used to really enjoy Beetlejuice as a kid, which I don't know if a kid should be watching that movie specifically, but I loved it, especially where they had that whole Deo singing scene, which was amazing. But as I think as my tastes matured and I grew up, although not that this is a very mature movie, but as a young teen, I loved Ace Ventura. He was like
Yeah.
my hero. But I don't know how much those movies are going to hold up now if I had to rewatch. But um, honestly, I think the movie that I've probably rewatched the most, and the one that is probably the most quotable, would have to be 10 Things I Hate About You. It's
Oh,
quite a
nice.
mainstream favorite, but it's probably a mainstream favorite for a reason. It's just such a good movie. It's so feel
Yeah.
good. It's fun. It's got a great cast. It's amazing. I mean, yeah. I mean, outside of that, I think it's probably going to be, if you had to say director, I'm going to go full hipster and say Wes Anderson. I mean, I really do love Wes
Nice.
Anderson. And so I think when Grand Budapest Hotel came out, I was blown away by that movie. It really was one of the best movies I'd seen for a very, very long time when I went to go see it.
Yeah, I love Wes Anderson too.
Mm.
I haven't really reached back into his older filmography, but the first date that I took my now wife on was to Isle of Dogs when that came
Oh,
out, which is also a great movie. Has a really great food scene in it too, actually, when
yeah,
they do the stop
yeah.
motion sushi.
That is a very good, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Have you got any more? I know you suggested Big Night for this episode, but are there any other food movies or
Oh,
moments that you can think
yeah.
of
I
off
mean,
the
so
top of your head?
the thing is, when you first invited me to come on, and I was like, oh man, yes, there's so many great food movies. And then I went through your backlog, and I was like, oh, 100-Foot Journey done. Okay, Chef done. All of the big ones. Ratatouille, obviously. But I mean, I really would have to say, I think I listened to the Chef episode most recently of your podcast, and I think your guest nailed it. I actually can't remember if it was you or him who said it, but my big takeaway from that movie was exactly what you guys pointed out, was that thing of um, most movies need to have that depressing drop scene, like something bad happens and they have to resolve it, and that movie just keeps building. There's no downer in that movie, and you come away going, oh man, that was rad, that was fun, and I think it kind of showed that you don't need to always bum people out like in a storyline. You can just have a good storyline and have it be fun, and yeah, I mean, so that I think is probably my favorite. I don't know if you've been watching Chef Show on Netflix.
Oh, I haven't got to Chef's Show yet. We've sort of been late to the party with Chef's Table and Street Food.
Uh,
So we've kind of been going through those series, which have been great, but I haven't got to
yeah, so
Chef's Show yet.
if you enjoyed that movie, I really can recommend it. So I mean, it's basically just Favreau and Roy Choi, who was his kind of food coach, or his chef coach before he filmed, kind of going through all the dishes in the movie, just recreating them. It really is very good fun. But I mean, if you're looking for other good things to watch on Netflix, food related, I would highly recommend Ugly Delicious.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
take lots of recommendations.
I love that show. So it's all
Yeah.
good.
No, that's awesome. It was cool. My wife found the website of Roy Choi's his recipes from the movie Chef, and so I
Yeah.
recreated 4 of them on that episode,
Wow.
which was
Yes.
probably not the best idea to like try and cook 4 dishes and try and have a podcast that same evening, but it worked. Just had a very big cleanup afterwards, but I mean,
I can
it's
imagine.
food is super delicious. Awesome. All right. Now, shifting gears to food, do you have a
Mm.
favorite food, cuisine, or thing you love to cook often? Or
Yeah. So like so I married, my wife is half Italian, half Portuguese, right? So she has a lot of sort of very Mediterranean flavors with the pastas and all of, you know, she's very big into that. Um, so I mean, I really do enjoy Italian food. I mean, I don't think there are many people who don't enjoy Italian food, uh, and it's so broad in what you can do with it. But I also feel like even if I wasn't married to her, I think most people enjoy Italian food. It's kind of like become a Western staple. So if you're kind of pushing a bit, if you're pushing the boat out a bit from that, I think I really did fall in love with Thai food and Thai cuisine. I lived overseas for a year in South Korea, which was a very interesting experience, and I'll get onto that now. But obviously, being so in Asia, so close to a lot of the other Southeast Asian countries, there got the opportunity to travel to Thailand and Cambodia, and kind of just really fell in love with the street food there. Um, and I think coming back, have really sort of endeavored to seek out good Thai restaurants, authentic Thai restaurants here in Cape Town. And we are quite a metropolitan city. We have a lot of different cultural cuisines here, so we're very blessed with that. But um, yeah, there's a few. I had to learn the phrase because the one Thai restaurant I went to couldn't speak any English, so I had to learn how to order what I wanted. And so the dish that I really love is called bao mi prik pao gai, which is
wow.
it's a very simple like noodle with peanuts and chicken and like a very spicy chili sauce, but it's delicious, man. It's super great. So, but getting back to Korea, if you will indulge me for a second,
Yeah, go for it.
there really hasn't been a bigger cultural shock in my life than moving from South Africa to Korea. I mean, I know that you're in Australia, as far as I know, near Sydney. I feel like we
Manly.
Manly, okay, um, and I feel like, you know, we all have Western culture. Like we're very similar in our lifestyles. But you move to an Asian country like Korea, and the food on offer there is just like nothing your palate has ever tasted before. So a lot of seafood, a lot of um, like broths, and I think that it comes out of the history of, you know, sort of the Japanese occupation of Korea, where they really didn't have a lot of food, and so they had to kind of really get creative with what they could find. And I think that kind of stuck. And so even though they've kind of come out of that period, a lot of it is still cultural. So you get a lot of these like very thin and watery broths that just have sort of bones and seaweed in. And it's interesting. You know, it took me about 8 months of the year just to get used to what I was eating, and then I ended up leaving. So
Yeah.
it was unfortunate, but kimchi at least has kind of made it out of Korea and come into a bit more mainstream consciousness these days.
Yeah, no, it sounds delicious. It's so cool to have an experience like that. I've been pretty blessed to like I used to play hockey. So
Mm.
I traveled to South Africa to play hockey. I've traveled,
Hey.
yeah, traveled to, I've been on some mission trips. I've been to China. Anyway, I
Mm.
think I really enjoyed Argentina. I've been to play hockey and
Mm.
I love their culture and cuisine. It is very meat based. I remember seeing like a vertebrae being laid out, like cooked to eat, and I was a bit shocked at that. But
Yeah.
I think my favorite place I've visited was probably China. Like, again, you have the Western version of Chinese in Australia, which you know is yummy, but nothing compared
Mm.
to just fresh, the home cooked like food in China was just so flavorful. Like it was
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah,
That's amazing. That is amazing.
cool. All right. Well, we should get talking about Big Night. Um,
Mm.
what I'll do is just give a little intro just so everybody knows what it is. So I'll say a few things and then I'll check in with you. So Big Night was released in 1996, and it's the directorial debut of actors Stanley Tucci and Campbell Scott. The film also stars Stanley Tucci, along with Tony Shalhoub, Isabella Rossellini, Ian Holm, Minnie Driver, and Alison Janney. The plot is as follows. In 1950s New Jersey, two brothers run an Italian restaurant. Business is not going well as a rival Italian restaurant is outcompeting them in a final effort to save the restaurant. The brothers plan to put on an evening of incredible food. So Big Night was a low-budget independent film that was quite successful for independent film standards when released, and it even earned some Independent Spirit Awards, including winning the screenplay, which was co-written by Stanley Tucci and Joseph Tropiano. So Nick, you chose this film. What sort of intrigued you or hooked you in? I know you had to go on a bit of a search after seeing that we've already done a few food movies.
Yeah, so Big Night, I think, look, so I actually hadn't heard of it before. I think probably because of its independent status, but going through what was available, it kind of stuck out to me mainly because of the cast. So I'm a really big fan of Stanley Tucci's. I mean, I'm not used to seeing him look like this. He's so young in this movie. He kind of looks like I couldn't actually tell who it was in the beginning. In the very first few opening scenes, I was like, is that a young Al Pacino? Is that a young Mark Strong? You know, he looks like so many of those like young Italian dudes, but it's amazing to kind of to see him at that age, you know. But I love the cast. I love Tony Shalhoub. I love Stanley Tucci. A big fan of Minnie Drivers. I remember, I think I kind of fell in love with her as an actress watching Grosse Pointe Blank back in the day. I don't know if you've seen that movie with John Cusack.
Haven't seen that one.
Just a great movie, man. It's like a hitman kind of, but like an assassination comedy movie. I don't know if you can picture that. It's great.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really, really fun. And so she's in that. So I kind of fell in love with her in that movie and was very excited to see her in this movie. But and obviously Ian Holm was an interesting pick. You know, only really having seen him in Lord of the Rings, it's great to see him in a completely different role.
I couldn't believe it was him.
I know. And he's very over the top in this movie.
Yes, he is. I guess we could talk about that, you know, when we move on to the next section. But yeah, I know I generally sometimes type in Google, you know, food movies just to see where we can go next. And I had seen Big Night. And yeah, I love Stanley Tucci. We did our episode on Julie and Julia, which has Stanley Tucci playing
the husband.
Yeah, the husband of Julia Child. And that is a great movie. And he is just, you know, I feel like he has just such charisma, which, I mean, he really does in this movie too. So yeah, I was excited. It was nice I feel like with the other movies, I hadn't seen them before, I'd heard about them. This was pretty fresh viewing. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. All right, cool. Pardon me. Let's dive in and chat spoilers. So for those listening, spoilers ahead, go watch Big Night. I watched it on YouTube because it was really the only thing available to me. It's pretty great. If you have a smart TV, I just buy it and get it up on there and it works pretty well. Watch this on YouTube, find it. I'm pretty sure you can get it off Apple TV or somewhere. So go watch it. It's a great time. It's only an hour and 45. Or if you want to be spoiled, we are going to spoil things. So section 2, it's time to dine. Let's actually talk about this film. So basically we just start off with highlights. So did you have any highlights? Can be anything.
Yeah, so there were a few. I mean, I thought that it was, I loved just like also coming from my my side of things of being like behind the camera generally. I really loved the way it was shot. I think it was really beautiful. There's a lot of really interesting sort of single take shots that they kind of did in the thing, just from a technical aspect. And I mean, specifically that last scene, it kind of blew my mind just from like a writing perspective and shooting perspective. I mean, it's a 6.5 minute or 7 minutes long scene where the camera doesn't really move. It's just stuck in the corner of this room. You watch Tucci's character Secondo kind of come in, and you just watch a man make an omelet from scratch, just kind of the whole thing, and he doesn't really say anything. And Mark Anthony's character, I think Cristiano, is just asleep on the table, and he gets up and they're just kind of sitting around, and you know, it's such an interesting conceptually to end a movie on. It could, I think it, people could kind of view it as a bit of a downer because nothing happens and it's slow and it's quiet. There's no dialogue. But I mean, I think the whole point is when you're watching a movie like this, you're probably already the type of person, I don't want to sound snobbish, but you're really the type of person that would appreciate the interest factor alone just from that kind of a shot, And what I thought was really powerful at the end of that is you kind of, and I know I'm jumping way ahead in the storyline here, but you kind of
do it.
You're kind of coming off this whole conflict between the brothers, but there's always been this underlying sort of love between the two of them that is kind of going to be very difficult to break. And so even though they're fighting and they're really angry with each other, that last scene is so powerful in the fact that there doesn't need to be words, so they, Primo walks in and sits down and he just kind of just gets him a plate, dishes him up some food. They just pat each other on the back and they don't need to say anything, but they know that everything's going to be fine. And I just loved it was quite powerful in its simplicity, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I loved the ending. I think I'd been watching a few too many sort of feel good movies in that, like a lot of the food movies that we watch, like often they end in a quite nice resolution. Julia Child sells a cookbook and in 100-Foot Journey, they start working for each other. And, in this one, like, I guess the brilliance of the ending is that it is so ambiguous in a way, in that, like, they are bankrupt. Like in a few days, everything's gone. They've just spent all their money on this huge, big night of food, and nothing, he didn't even show up. He wasn't even, never was an invite. And we're just left knowing that at the end of the day, at least they're still brothers. And yeah, I think I really like that. I think I was really thinking and dwelling on them. And I think that is the key for me. That was probably the key thing that kept me going through the film, is the chemistry and the performances of Shalhoub and Tucci. Like,
yeah.
I think they're probably the best parts of the movie. I think Shalhoub is probably my favorite as Primo. I love Tucci. He's awesome in this movie, but Shalhoub is the passionate character. He knows who he is. He knows that he will always be cooking and, cooking his food. He's not going to compromise on his cuisine. He's not going to compromise on who he is. And he's shy. And I really enjoyed his awkward flirting with Alison Janney's character. I think that was hilarious. And I love how he's, looking in the pot to find a reflection so he can do his hair at the end. And I think that's just kind of, I feel like if I didn't know they were kind of high prolific actors, I would genuinely believe that they were brothers. And I think that bond gives you like themes, they really are the themes of the movie kind of clashing. And so that I think that keeps the movie going. And yeah, it was probably my favorite thing. I have heaps of others, but yeah. Let's
What I also really liked is, you kind of, if we're going to get into sort of the dissecting of the themes and stuff, what I thought was great was, you've got the two brothers who are so rooted in a sort of a similar cultural experience. Obviously, Italian roots, they're very strong. And so they both have very strong family feel and very strong, cultural ties, but they couldn't really be more different in their outworkings of their personalities. So you've got Primo, who's your classic temperamental artist type, who believes in the purity of his work and he doesn't want to compromise. And then you've got Secondo, the brother, who is the businessman who is very willing to compromise on the art if he, so that they can make money, because it's important to make money. And so you kind of got these two clashing. I think it's a fairly big theme in a lot of movies, that sort of art versus commerce type theme. And I think that they pull it off so well. And what I really loved, specifically one of the first scenes, which laid the sort of groundwork for the lighter undertones, was the risotto scene with that American woman going, yeah, but where's the spaghetti? You know, and you've got Tucci's character who's trying to pacify the situation, please the customer, make money, and Secondo throwing pots and pans in the kitchen and ready to storm out and confront her because why don't you understand Italian cuisine?
Yeah, I loved that scene. I think I think the script is really great in that like it ends on that kind of down, well, what could be seen as a downer, but is a really kind of great thematic ending. But there's so many
Mm,
great moments of humor and that, yeah, that works so well. And yeah, I think it's so great because that scene happens and you have the, oh, we'll just order a side of spaghetti. We'll just order a side of meatballs. Like we will still get what we want. And, Prima refuses to do it. And then we see Secondo go over to Pascal's that night.
mm,
And what's the first thing he sees on their table is this huge plate of spaghetti and meatballs. And
yeah.
it really does, it really is a big wink to the audience being like, yep, this is exactly what you need to do to succeed in America with Italian cuisine. Like no one's willing to wait the time. Like Primo's cooking this from scratch. He's putting all of his love and passion into it, but there's no appreciation. I
Mm.
love also the guy's like, do you want some cheese? And he's giving cheese for like 5 minutes. And I thought that was hilarious
Yeah.
because I love cheese, but also it's a good little tiny metaphor of just American excess, really. Like with
Yeah.
pecorino cheese or Parmesan, you only need just a sprinkling on top of something because it's such a strong flavor. But
Mm,
yeah, and so he goes to Pascal's. He sees the flaming dish, and he is just thinking, "This is what it takes to succeed." Yeah, I really think that is a key pivotal theme. I think we see Shaloub never give up. Like he has a number of rants about how the cuisine is just being destroyed by the other side. And I think at the end of the day, like Tucci says to him, he never compromised once to make their restaurant a
mm,
success in their big beach scene. But I do think
mm,
you see Shaloub slightly, Primo, but you see him slightly compromise and soften as you see how much this means to Secondo, and actually letting him have the big night was a
mm,
sort of compromise. Like that wasn't really, he didn't even want to do it for Pascal at all because they weren't on great terms. But even
mm,
him just having the big night, you see him relaxed, you see him in a great relationship, that they both like each other, him and Alison Janney's character. And I think that
mm,
is another cool little way the theme is discussed. Like Secondo, he doesn't know what he wants. It says a lot of time, like identity is probably a big theme. Shaloub knows what he wants. Primo knows what he wants. Whereas Secondo, he's got a mistress, Gabriella, and he has Phyllis, who is his American girlfriend, who's unwilling to kind of move the relationship along, unwilling to propose or get married because he's caught in between those two worlds. And like
mm,
everything, he's caught between the world of supporting his brother, whom he obviously loves and defends, versus his dream to become successful, to earn money and to be a part of the American world. I think you see that when he goes to look at the Cadillacs with
yeah.
with that shady business dealer, which is hilarious because he gets introduced to the dinner scene and the first thing he says is, "Oh, do you drive like the other car?" Um,
Yeah.
I think it's quite a funny movie, but it also isn't shallow. Like I think I love that it probably is a quieter, less Hollywood movie than maybe people were expecting,
Mm,
and it sort of challenges the audience a bit, and it's almost like a Shaloub Primo dish. Like it is kind of filled with passion and love, and yeah, I think I really appreciated that as the movie went along, and I guess my not even expectations, but sort of what I was thinking the movie would be kind of fell away, I guess.
mm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a challenging watch. I think I expected it to be lighter than it was, but not to its detriment. I just think that was my misguided expectation. But I think you're right in the sort of the sense between the two. He's kind of juggling the difference between old world Italy and new world America. Excuse me. And I think that kind of also plays out, like you said, in his relationships. So he's got old world Gabriella Rossellini character and Minnie Driver's Phyllis, the new young American girl. And so he's kind of caught between these two worlds in more than just one of his, expressions in life. And I think you're right with that scene in Pascal's. I don't think they portray American. I don't think American culture comes off very good in this movie. It really just comes across as excess, uncultured, sort of more quantity over quality. I think and I think excuse me. I think that what was also nice to see between, and obviously Alison Janney making an appearance was great. Her being one of the characters in 10 Things I Hate About You. So
yeah.
It was a great little touch point there for me. But I really loved the difference that it brought out in Primo's character between his sort of really fiery, feisty, confident chef side, and then he kind of becomes this bumbling schoolboy around her. And it's great just to see the contrast in his character in between those two different scenes, because I mean Tucci's character Secondo kind of stays the same regardless. He's always that confident, slick businessman type guy, but Primo's character really does have a lot of facets to him in terms of the situation that he finds himself in. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I 100% agree. And I think touching on that point of it being set in the 50s and the American culture not getting a good rap, I think I did a bit of reading, and I know it was probably not the great timing, but I sent you an essay, which I highly recommend you read, because I didn't find much out there research-wise for Big Night. I don't think it kind of fell under the radar for quite a while, and there's a few articles now picking up on it. But this essay was talking about how in the 50s, there was sort of no room on the table, literally, for any other cuisine other than American cuisine. And which I found fascinating, that the culinary schools were basically getting a large majority of immigrants through, like maybe 50% of their students every year. And that they were being forced to sort of cook American, speak English, and pledge allegiance to the way. And a bit of a crossover, but like Julia Child's book, the art, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, is kind of attributed to leading to a bit more of the food revolution, I guess, in America, where some more cuisines outside of the Americanized kind of cuisines that we see in the movie start to be introduced. And I think that was pretty fascinating for me to sort of research and find out, because they really are like it really just does not put a great light on America, because it is often touted as a place where people who, and I think Secondo says this himself, that if you work hard, like America is a place where you're meant to succeed and where dreams can come true, and it's the American dream. And he works hard, and so does Primo. They work really hard. They produce really good stuff, and it doesn't work out for them. And I think I found that a pretty fascinating aspect of the movie as a message. Was often you get these movies where the main conflict is resolved by the end. They have to overcome pretentiousness or prejudice or something where one cuisine or one type of food or people is not viewed the same as the other. And I guess that isn't really conquest, conquest. I don't even know if that's a word, but that's not even really dealt with. Like that kind of gulf between art and commerce, I guess, like succeeding, like they would have had to compromise their food and their cuisine to actually get through. And so I guess that's a really interesting thought that the filmmakers have made, is going, what do a pair of immigrant brothers do when they've tried their best, as best as they possibly can, to maintain their own culture as an immigrant in America? The essay mentioned like that is one of the last things that people will keep like hold on to as they move into a new place. As you know, like food has a massive part in everybody's life and evokes strong memories of being back home and flavors and all those kind of things. And so, yeah, I guess I found that really kind of confronting and challenging, that kind of heartbreaking that they would actually go, they would go through all of this and not come out at the end. And so, yeah, and I think Tucci, I think by the end, he probably realizes that it was probably a no-win situation, really. Like in that last scene, like he seems like he's pretty hopeless, but I love that he's even thoughtful enough to, like, you know, Primo isn't even there, but he chops the omelet into 3 pieces and intentionally saves one because he knows that Primo is going to come. And I thought that was really nice. Like, I think in terms of filmmaking, like often you get films and scripts that will really, really hit you on the nose with it. But I think maybe the script will fall into it sometimes in this movie, a couple of times maybe, and maybe one performance in Home. But but I do think like that ending is what filmmaking, you know, what film is about. Like having those performances and the thing all portrayed visually in that one shot was really nice. And I think that reminds me of the ocean in this movie. I kind of picked up on it after, but the first scene is Mark Antony's character. I can't remember his name. Cristiano, that's right. Should remember that. He was coming back from the ocean, having a little break, and he comes back to the restaurant, and it seems like, again, Chalhoub and Tucci in a bit of a tiff, and it's the night, and it's kind of a place of peace and almost a place of cleansing, because the final act is Minnie Driver going for a swim when she's found out that she's being cheated on, and she's just absolutely devastated because everything's sort of fallen apart for her, and she goes for a swim and basically washes herself of the men in her life, really. And then that's the final kind of confrontation too between Primo and Secondo, where they finally are able to realize that America is, being in America is eating them up and tearing them apart. And yeah, it's pretty cool metaphor, I found, or kind of visual part of the movie. Yeah,
I think that it's you know, you kind of get to that point at the end of the movie where those themes of you know, authenticity versus compromise kind of come through really strongly again. So I think I was saying that, you know, the difference in authenticity and compromise kind of come back in with the choices that they're left with after, you know, this big night, and they now go, well, if we want to stay in America, we're going to have to go work for Pascal and compromise on our quality and compromise on our belief system, and we don't even like this guy now, you know, or we go back to Rome and we go work in our uncle's restaurant there, and, you know, stay true to who we are, but lose out on this sort of dream that we both had of what life could be like, you know. And so I think it's an interesting position that they get to, that like you say, they leave it up to the audience to kind of imagine where it can go from there, because there's no resolution. But I do feel like we kind of know they're not going to go work for Pascal after Tucci has Secondo has that confrontation with him, when they find out that, you know, this big man that he promised, Louis Prima, isn't actually going to arrive at all. And so, that really bummed me out, actually, because I think that, you know, you kind of, even in these films, you kind of, you condition to root for the good guys, that things are going to go right for them. And so when it doesn't, I was so bummed. I just wanted to like, why did you do this to them, man? And you obviously know he's very selfish. He's a selfish man. He's larger than life, and he only really seems to care about himself. And I'm talking about Pascal here. Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, if you're talking about things that bummed me out, I was so bummed that he chose, well, not that he specifically chose, but kind of ruined things with Minnie Driver, you know, for Gabriella Rossellini. I'm just like, I don't know if it's just I have a personal crush on Minnie Driver. I don't know. But I was like, why? Make the better choice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was definitely rooting for him and Minnie Driver to go the distance. I was also a bit like, Minnie, you know, he's too good. You're too good for him. Like, really, like you helped in the kitchen. Like, you've always sort of been there to support him, and they did seem like they had good chemistry. So yeah, I was bummed about that, I will say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I was rooting for them, and it is just classic because you get that big moment, the big night, which is such a fun 30-minute scene.
Mm,
Like, yeah, obviously probably the best scene in the movie, and you're going, wow, this is actually, like, in a weird way, art and commerce sort of have come together in that I
yeah.
reckon they did sort of make a compromise. Shalhoub was like, I don't really want to do it for this guy, but I'm willing to. And Tucci was like, well, you can cook the best food that you can, all the recipes. And these people came and they were absolutely blown away by the food. Like, and we'll talk more in depth about that later. But I
Mm,
think it is sort of cruel to the audience because you go, wow, these guys are so talented. You're rooting for them to succeed. And in a way, you've sort of watched, like, I checked the movie today, like the last hour of the movie is getting prepared for the big night. Like, it
wow.
is really like how they spread. It's so well. I feel like it is well edited. Like, you see them, but getting the ingredients and going about their day, getting set up. So you feel so invested, like
Yeah.
you're almost like you're preparing the food with them. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think yeah, it is a bum that you just doesn't it work out. Um,
Mm,
yeah, I think I loved how it was shot. I loved the music. I thought the music was really
mm.
great. Like,
It was
I
very, very
think
good.
they used either, they used some songs, like had a soundtrack in there, but also some original music, which was either this kind of plucky guitar or almost like these like bongo drums or I'm not amazing at instruments, but I love music in movies, so I don't
Yeah.
really know how to describe it, but I just found it sort of had this nice sort of energy to it that sort of kept you going through the movie, which I really liked.
Yeah, and I think it was a good, like, offset sort of juxtaposition to some of the more, like, serious undertones that were going on. You've kind of got this happy, upbeat sort of Italian village music that's kind of
Yeah.
playing over that, and I think that it kind of helps to lighten the mood in some instances, but also to reinforce the mood in other ones. But it was great. One of the other scenes that it was actually so interesting because I was watching with a friend of mine who is also very into film and into food. And so we kind of watched together, and his comment in the very first scene when they kind of go into the kitchen just before the risotto scene is that it felt from the lighting and the framing, um, it felt like I was watching an episode of Faulty Towers. I don't know if you
Yeah.
how it just felt. I mean, it didn't continue through the rest of the movie, but in that beginning scene, it felt, and even the sort of levity of the moment, the lightness with that whole when the risotto argument happens, it felt very much like in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And maybe it's also because Shalhoub, with his big moustache, has a look of Manuel about him. It just felt very reminiscent of watching old Faulty Towers episodes, which I really loved. I mean, I thought that was great. But
Yeah. 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 I think they really lean into their comedy chops. Like, it's so hard to do good comedy
mm,
well. I think a lot of people kind of see, I love comedy.
mm,
And been binge watching, like, the last 5 years, a lot of good comedy stuff. And I think it often gets sort of underrated, like, oh, he's just a comedic actor, or they're just a comedic actor, and wow, they can do
mm,
something dramatic. It's like, no, you have to nail comedy. Like, you have to be able to make these situations funny and not seem over the top or not sort of underdo it. And I think that the chemistry is so good. Like, when he just opens the door and he's like, you tell the customer, like, tell the customer, tell the customer,
yeah,
you tell him. And he's like, no, they're a Philistine, I'm not going to tell him. And so, we don't know yet, but he's actually really shy. Like, there's no way that he's going to go out and tell that
yeah.
customer no. But
It's also amazing how
yeah.
in that moment you kind of that it's like unintentional prop comedy, that swing door
Yeah,
was
yeah,
such a
yeah.
comedic, like how can, it's interesting to think how you can make a door funny, but just the action of it swinging open into them and close and back open onto them, and they, I thought it was great. Those
I
little
think
moments that are so genius.
oh yeah. Another good one, which I was a little bit taken aback by, is when he's talking to Pascal and he's got the light right in front of his eyes.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, I was like, what are you doing here? And I kind of got it. I was like, okay, it's a bit of a metaphor because when he knocks it down, then the light is covering Secondo's eyes. So it's almost like Secondo's going in, he's trying to convince Pascal to come over, and then Pascal's like, no, smash the light down. And now Secondo is almost being pulled along and conned. And I thought that was cool. It took me a while. I was like, that's a choice. It is a directorial
Yeah.
choice. But I did find that, even when he smashes the light down, it was kind of a wink at the audience being like, okay, we understand that you are like, what is going on? Does your, videographer, cinematographer know what is happening in the frame? Like there's this big light in the way. But I think this movie is funnier than it has every right to be. And it's a lot of, good comedies, like good writing, but also good physical comedy too. I'm a big fan of. Like I love Arrested Development, if you've seen that show. And that is like the peak of writing and physical comedy. Like they're so good at it. Anyway, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say that exactly on that point of physical comedy, but there's always that fine line between when physical comedy becomes slapstick, and it definitely wasn't close to being slapstick. It was just really good, really good physical comedy. And I think that light scene was so interesting just from, because obviously you go like, there's no ways they could miss this. It's blocking a dude's face. Like there's no ways they can miss that. But it was interesting because it was such a, I don't know how to describe it. Like it's such a bold choice of metaphor or visual metaphor that they're using in that scene that doesn't really get repeated anywhere else. There's nothing that's sort of as, excuse the pun, in your face as that scene. So I think it makes it stand out a bit more, in contrast to the other sort of physical humor that comes through in the movie.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. If you have any other things to mention, just bring them up. But I thought, let's talk about food.
Yeah, please.
Let's talk about our favorite food moments. Obviously, we've kind of got to all of the scenes. I'm going to mention a little one first, and we can get to the big night dinner scene later. But I really loved when they're getting, it looks like basil from the market guy. And yeah, I love market scenes in food movies. I don't know why, but I just know that when you're going to buy or get ingredients for something, that's one of the great things about cooking. Like you are looking for the best ingredients and you're getting excited. I don't understand people who don't like grocery shopping. Like I love going food shopping. Like it's the best.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
And I love basil. Like basil is probably in my top 3 herbs, maybe my number 1 herb ever. And so I felt I was with Primo right there. Like that is not good looking basil. Like I was not happy for him. So I love that little scene. Yeah. Did you have any favorite food moments?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did love that scene. I think that, I know that, like you're saying with the basil, it's definitely a favorite of mine, and specifically, obviously, because of Italian cooking with my wife, and we use it a lot. So we grow a bunch of basil here. It's very temperamental. When I try to grow it, it's not always successful, but it's good. But and it's also good in a little gin and tonic, a little sprig of basil. It always adds a little bit of flavor there. But I think that I mean, we've spoken about the risotto scene, and then later on, I think what I really enjoyed was that they did that sort of tricolor, like Italian flag dish of the different flavors of risotto, which for me, I mean, I do enjoy a good risotto, but I would just, in that scene, I was going, I just want to taste those. What do they taste like? I'm so intrigued. But I know that that to make risotto, man, it's tough to get it right. And I don't know. Obviously, you in Australia, we get all of the Australian MasterChef that comes across here, and so we watch all of that. And it's kind of like the well-known death dish. No one seems to be able to ever get it right because it's so difficult to get it done properly. And I think that also adds weight to the whole thing of how good Primo is as a cook, that he can just make so many variations of this really, really tough dish.
Yeah, 100%. I love risotto, and I don't want to seem too prideful in this, but risotto was the first thing that I made my wife when we were
Wow.
dating.
That's
And
brave.
yeah, yeah, like I'd cooked it before, but and I had housemates tell me that it was good. So, it's this beautiful, mushroom risotto. The key is to buy a really good wine and good quality stock, and it's a lot of time and a lot of love and a lot of stirring. Like you are
Yeah.
stirring and adding stock for a good hour. Like it is a
Wow.
laborious process, but when you get it right, like I feel like I've almost basically got it. But yeah, when you get it right, it is so incredibly delicious. And in terms of what recipe we're going to do, I haven't cooked it yet. I had a good idea. I was like, maybe I could we could both cook it, but I no qualms if you don't want to try it, because it would be a big thing. I was like, on Mondays, is one of my days off. I try and get cooking for the show, but I was thinking I can make my risotto and then add maybe a pesto to one and a mushroom to another and a cheese to another. I already got told no seafood
Yeah,
for the risotto. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm not a huge seafood fan myself. I mean, I enjoy certain types of seafood, but I'd be happy to do a seafood-free risotto.
yeah. And my wife too. Like we like seafood, we love Japanese, but we just weren't keen on the seafood risotto. So it was either that or the timpano, which we'll get
The
to. But
timpano.
I think
Yeah,
the
we'll get there. We'll
timpano
get
is going to be way too hard. I think I can actually sort of replicate the triple risotto. So I'm going to give that a go. I guess you'll see by the photos when I put it up whether it is actually any good. And I'm going to insert myself or my wife saying how good it is right here. Okay, honey. I've been in the kitchen. I've gone on many grocery trips to recreate this iconic tricolour risotto from the movie Big Night, and you are now tasting it. Tell me your thoughts.
Amazing. I couldn't decide which one to try first. In the end, I went with the pesto. It's so yummy, really fresh and zingy, and the basil's really beautiful. And then I tried the tomato one, and I think the creaminess really comes through in that one. It was really fresh and bright. And then I tried the beautiful mushroom one, and wow, those porcini mushrooms are beautiful, aren't they? Really nice, rich flavor, and just being able to alternate between bites of all three is really special and decadent, really, to have 3 different risottos in one meal. It's lovely. Thanks, honey.
What did you think of the presentation?
Beautiful. It was like a flag. Very nice.
Yay. And yeah, so let's just get to the big night dinner scene. Obviously, there's the triple risotto, which is incredible. It looks so delicious. I really wanted the pesto one. I love pesto, so I wanted that. Yeah. And then obviously you get probably get a 2 or 3 minute scene of them making the timpano. So, the billions of eggs and the flour and cutting the pasta, and then you get the big reveal of the timpano at the end. And fun fact, Stanley Tucci said that the timpano was terrible. The one they cooked in the movie, they'd made it, they wanted to get the slice perfect for the shot. And I think they did. You know how he says, I've cooked it too hard. They genuinely cooked it too hard. He said they all spat out, the actors spat it out. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So there you go. I've just ruined the movie magic there, but
oh, it's a killer as well, because I mean, it looks so good when it comes out, but the thing is that that's always the thing that I struggle with when I'm making like a lasagna or anything that's kind of held together by a pasta, is that either if you do it slightly too little, or if you don't let it rest long enough, it just slops everywhere. And so, especially for a scene like that, you can't really shoot a sloppy timpano coming out, And I watched I don't know if you watched Binging with Babish on YouTube.
Big fan.
And, and did you watch his timpano?
I hadn't
video?
got to it yet. I hadn't realized he'd done one. That's so cool. I have to watch it.
So I watched his timpano one from Big Night, obviously, and so I don't think he has enough time to let it rest properly, but you can see what can happen, because his one when he cuts the slice out, it's like he is trying very hard for this thing not to fall apart, and it's very loose and not sloppy. I mean, that's not the right word, but it's like it's just very loose and very temperamental. It looks like it could fall apart at any moment. And so you compare that to the one from the movie. The movie's one was definitely rock solid.
Yeah, I'm like, it does make sense when you think about it, because it's almost a pie, but using pasta as the bit that holds it all together. Like, obviously pastry is designed to sort of do that a little bit better than pasta. Like, you kind of know on a lasagna that you're gonna be able to get your square and eat it, and you get a little bit more leeway. But I guess that is the structure of the dish. And there's just so much, like, I mean, I'm a big sucker for seeing people hand make pasta in a movie. Or so good. I follow an account on Instagram called Pasta Grannies. It's amazing. Basically, it's like people who submit their grandmas or their nonnies in Italy hand making pasta, just videos of it.
Wow.
So if you're into that, it's pretty great.
I'm gonna be into that very shortly.
Yeah. But yeah, so much good stuff in it, like boiled egg and
That was a
tomatoes
surprise
and
to me,
basil.
if I'm honest. The boiled egg caught me a bit off guard there. I was like, it's not something I would have thought to add to a dish like that. I mean, I enjoy boiled egg. It felt out of place, kind of. I don't know. Maybe it works flavor wise, but I was surprised by it.
Yeah, I've made a lasagna before, like an eggplant lasagna that's had boiled egg in it as part of the layers, but not like full boiled egg. Like, you would crumble it up and add it to the layers, and that was pretty nice. I think for we eat mostly vegetarian at home for my wife, and I think for that it adds a good level of protein to a vegetarian dish. So yeah, it's fine. Like, I mean, you're getting a little bit of flavor from the yolk, but it mostly will blend into the sauce or whatever you've got in the dish. But yeah, so those were probably the two biggest things. There was a beautiful fish. There was a pig, like a full pig,
The little suckling pig.
Yeah, suckling pig, which just showed out of nowhere. Like, I had no idea that they were going to do that. Then, like, a bunch of chickens. There was bread everywhere. There was so much wine. There was garlic and beetroot and just so many different dishes. Like, it was, as I was saying, to me, it was just like, I was going into that slightly disappointed about the amount of food in the movie. And because I was like, we're at like an hour in, like, you know, I'm wanting a little bit more food. And I think that definitely helped, was that amazing party scene.
It's so great because my like I said, my wife is Italian, and her father was born in Italy and grew up there and moved to South Africa as a sort of boy. But about 2 years ago, we actually had the privilege of being able to go to visit. I think it was for his 70th birthday. He took the whole family, because she's one of 4 siblings, and all of them are either married or in long-term relationships. And so there was 8 of us as kids, and the 2 of them, they took us all to Italy to go and see his village where he grew up. And I mean, it's awesome. Like the most sort of authentic. It's what you picture when you picture like authentic rural Italy. It's like this tiny little village up on this hill. You know, I'd say probably about 20% of the houses there, like, no one lives in anymore because it's just so far out of the way. And they took us up into the one day, one of his friends, this guy called Giuseppe, who could speak no English, took us all in this big bus, and he kind of drove us up into the mountains to this restaurant up on this hill in the middle of nowhere. So it's, you know, I think it was a massive restaurant. It was so weird because it was the middle of summer, massive restaurant. We were a big table of, 10 or 12 because we had some add-ons, and but there was maybe 2 or 3 other people in the whole restaurant, and so they just really, really packed it on for us. And so watching that big feast scene on the big night was so reminiscent of this afternoon that we kind of spent from about 1 in the afternoon until about 8 o'clock that night, non-stop eating. And they would just bring out dish after dish after dish after dish. And so you get to kind of dish 4 or 5 and you're going already like, oh man, I shouldn't have eaten as much as I did in dish 2. And you don't realize, but there's still about another 5 dishes to come out. It's like a 10-course meal. And eventually we got to the point where we all started hiding our plates away so they could stop dishing up food, because they just would refuse to not let you eat. And so the head chef kind of came out, and he had these, they were like, I think they were like meatball type things, but he kind of came around, he saw we didn't have plates, and he started freaking out. So he just went and grabbed forks, and he just started sticking these meatballs onto forks and handing them out like little meat lollipops to everyone.
Amazing.
But it was so reminiscent of that moment, I think, for me, of going like, wow, it really is Italian culture to not overfeed people, but it's almost like a spirit of generosity, you know.
Yeah, 100%.
Which I think was represented so well in that scene.
Yeah, it is more than just the food. Like they're dancing and they're having conversations, and I really liked, like, they're playing the ring game at the end,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty funny. And yeah, that's right. I think it really does capture that part of the culture and the cuisine is the generosity. Like, I think that is, their food is obviously incredible, but I think a big part of why it's such a beloved cuisine is that there's a lot of love and passion and generosity that comes with it. There's a big difference between being served excellent food in a sort of new aged brick wall, a kind of cold grey restaurant with kind of gastronomical chefs doing new experiments. I don't know if you're into that, but compared to like the warm hospitality and generosity of eating food anywhere, but especially, that sounds like a dream, being in an Italian village and served course after course. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. You're so right. And I think it is. So I mean, I can appreciate. I think like you, I think I could probably appreciate good gastronomic food if it's, but I think that my natural bend is I love leaning into the sort of the passion and the generosity of that sort of food more. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that if you look at French cuisine, I think people generally, maybe it's just because it's the classic, all the cooking schools kind of do French, but French cuisine is always held up as being really, really good. But you don't really ever see people get, oh man, I've just got a craving for some French food. Do you know what I mean? People get a craving for Italian food because it's so homely. It just makes you feel so good and warm inside, So I think there's something to be said for not necessarily quality over quantity. I think it's not that's the differentiator. I think it's it's passion and love and generosity more than quantity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting because would you call like Primo pretentious for sticking to his cuisine? Like, I don't think so. Like, I wouldn't use that word to describe his character. But in other movies, like in the 100-Foot Journey, the French restaurant is particularly described as being pretentious and seeing themselves better. And, it's not every French cuisine, it's not every French chef. It is probably a common stereotype. But I do think that this movie highlights just how much that it's just everybody's welcome. I love that. Like, everybody gets invited, no matter who you are. Like the guy who sells
the car salesman.
Yeah, the car salesman, the guy who sells him the bad basil is there, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, everybody's welcome, and it's just such a great thing that everybody's invited to the table to partake in the food. It's a thing that unites them, and yeah, I think that is probably one of my favorite things about the food. Like, it is, again, it does play, like, I love great food in a movie, but I love when it's sort of part of the themes too. Like, you have this, fresh, amazing food that does sum up sort of the art side. It is a piece of art and it is passionate, and you can taste the love and all of that being poured into it. Whereas Pascal's restaurant has all of the entertainment factor, like it's this red lighting and there's someone singing and there's the fire on the thing, but really they're just being served pretty plain pasta with meatballs on it or whatever it is. Like, I've almost got it the other way around. Like at Primo and Secondo's restaurant, it's, decorated with paintings that people have brought in to pay for food, and it's pretty austere, and they're really just letting the food sort of be the main attraction. And so yeah, I just think that they did that really well. And obviously, like, the ending is a really great little food scene that is part of the metaphor too. Like,
Yeah.
it is interesting because you don't really see Secondo cook that much in the movie.
Mm.
It really, I think it may be the only time that Secondo actually cooks is when he makes a simple omelet for Cristiano and Primo. So yeah, I really like that.
Mm. I'm just gonna. I like that you touched on it, and I think that it was also great as the theme of like hospitality and generosity. You know, they're struggling for money. They are about to go bankrupt, but they'll still let their friend come in and eat for free, essentially, and just pay them with these paintings that Primo seems to really like. Secondo could take or leave. You know, he doesn't really seem that passionate about the artwork, but he's even invited to the big night feast as well, which I thought was quite a nice little touch. And you know, and I definitely think I'm diving too deep into looking into, you know, themes and things. But if you look at the difference between Pascal's restaurant, it looks upbeat and fun, and everyone's having a good time, but it's still everyone at their individual tables is having a good time at the individual tables. If you look at the big night, it's like everyone who's in the restaurant is together. It's one big family table. No one there necessarily knows each other. They could have very easily have had that big night, but have had everyone at separate tables. But they, you know, they chose to kind of make it a big family meal. Everyone kind of together. The dancing all happens together. You're making new friends while you're eating, and I really love that juxtaposition between the two sort of experiences of the same cuisine.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And there's no such thing as going too deep. I love it. Got to analyze everything. All right. Well, in terms of anything else that you want to mention, we can talk about it. Otherwise, we can move to our final section and give our sort of final thoughts and ratings if you want to do that.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yep. All right. I call it compliments to the chef because it's what you do at the end. So this is, in terms of our ratings, we do, like, you know, I have a love-hate relationship with ratings. Sometimes I'll be like, films don't need to be rated. You know, they are what they are, which I do agree with, but also they're kind of fun. And really, at the end of the day, it's just a fun thing to do. And we don't really need to put that much weight in it, but it's fun. So a film rating, basically what you'd give the movie a score out of 10 for the quality of the movie, how engaged you were, blah, 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 emotions. And then a food rating, which is quality of food, quantity of food, how vital is it to the movie, all that kind of thing. So I can start if you want with a film rating.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. Well, I thought about it. I think when I left the movie, I was going to give it a lower rating than I'm going to give it now. And in terms of flaws, like, we didn't really chat about flaws. I do think Ian Holm maybe just does it almost a bit too much at some points. Like, I find him very enjoyable, but he pushes it a bit far. And I do think the script maybe flirts with being a bit too over the top at some points. So I'm kind of going to settle on an 8 out of 10 for the movie. I think it's very well produced. I really like the music. I really like its sort of measured pace. Like, it doesn't really strive to be this quick edited fly through thing with lots of crazy over the top scenes. Like, it's a beautiful character study that you kind of move along with and kind of feel. And yeah, so I'm going to go with an 8. What about you?
Oh man, I just thought of this now, and it's so lame and cheesy, but I don't care. I'm going to lean into it. So I think I completely agree with you about coming out of that movie. I think I probably would have scored it lower than now, almost a week later, being able to kind of like let it sort of sink in. And so here's my cheesy dumb analogy. It's like a timpano, you know. You've got to let it rest for a while. You just got to let it rest for a while, and it's
No, do it. It's good.
you know what I mean? And so, like, I think you come out, and if you judge it too quickly, I think you're right. I probably would have given it about a 6.5, 7-ish. And not because it's a bad movie. Really, it's not. I think maybe it's also it's so much of life's experiences are also about what's happening in life in and around that experience. And so, you know, like the unfortunate truth is that we have like a 1.5-year-old son who is going through some really bad sleeping at the moment. And so like just generally watching this late at night, really being, like just feeling not super on my best game. But the more that I kind of have reminisced about it and watched, some other things around it, I think and even just chatting to you now about it, I think you pull out all these kind of themes and you pull out all the great parts of it. It makes you go, there's a lot there that I think I internalized, but not necessarily consciously during the moment. And so you kind of come out of it. And I would say, yeah, I mean, I think like you say, there's a reason why it got such crazy good ratings. If you look at any sort of online rating, I think it got a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, there's not many movies that score that high. And there's a reason for that. And I think that it's a good cultural study. The juxtaposition of American culture versus authentic Italian culture. It's a good character study between the brothers and between, old world, new world, especially where it's set. I think was quite a pivotal time in America as well for where people were going. And so if you give Tucci his due as a director, writer, actor, for this sort of, I don't know if he actually wrote it. I just said that. I don't know if he did.
He did. He co-wrote it with someone. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, he was integrally involved in the sort of whole process, and I think you've got to actually go, no, like congratulations, well done, you pulled off an amazing thing. So yeah, I'd probably give it an 8.5. I think, which is quite a big jump from where I was at. I think immediately afterwards.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, completely agree. I love the timpano. It's so good. No, it makes so much sense because. Yeah, I think and I really like movies that grow on me. Like, I prefer that than the other way around. Like, I prefer to not leave a movie and go, and then your mind is suddenly poking holes in it. Whereas this one, I felt like maybe the ending, the last act sort of leaves you on a downer first watch. And I'm kind of keen to really go watch it again because I think I would now that I know what I'm expecting, I'd really sort of enjoy being back with the characters and going on the journey. So, yeah. All right, so let's go to food rating. So basically, look, it wasn't going well until we hit the hour mark. I was going to rate it pretty poorly, but I think the dinner scene saves it. The only criticism I have, like all the food's excellent. It's really well photographed. Like it looks delicious. Quality's amazing. And it works so well into the themes. Like we've already chatted about that, how it's this, spirit of hospitality and love flowing through this food and the juxtaposition with Pascal's restaurant and the scene at the end. And so, yeah, the only way it loses points for me is just there's probably about 45 minutes to 50 minutes where you don't really get much food. It's all kind of working towards the big night and they're doing great character work, like the Cadillac scene and the scene where you find out that Secondo's cheating and all that kind of stuff is really, the movie doesn't really work without it. So I'm not really criticizing the movie for it, but I think I'm also going to settle on an 8 with the food.
Yeah, and I think that I totally agree with you. I think, especially for a podcast like yours, you're probably going to run up against a bunch of movies that, because there's a limited amount of movies that are going to be solely around food. And so it's going to be about how good is the food when it comes in the movie, And so I think, for this movie, which is touted as being a food film, I think there is a lot more to it than just the food. And so I think if you go, okay, for when the food arrives, how is it, how much do they show you of it? Because I think what I really appreciated was being able to see the preparation scenes. I really enjoy those sorts of things. And so getting a look into the kitchen at the preparation, at the end product, at how people interact with the food, at their enjoyment of it, how that food influences the people and the scenes. I think it's really important to kind of go, it's how good is it for what it is. And I think if you look at the amount of food they made, at the risks they took, I mean, I've never seen a timpano before in my life before, so I was introduced to an entirely new experience of food. And I'm gonna shoot for the moon and give it a 9. I thought it was amazing, and maybe that's also got a lot to do with, like I was telling you, my experience of it. I think it resonated so much with me that it kind of took me back to that place. And I think that's also the beauty of what food can do, is that it can stir memories in you, and it can take you back to happy times in your life, just from flavors or experiences or smells. And even though we couldn't necessarily taste or smell it, just seeing it in that experience took me back to a really, really happy memory. So it's a 9 for me.
Awesome. Such a good rating. Great. So if I quickly do my maths correctly, that gives us 8.5 plus 9, 17.5, and then plus a 16. So that gives us 34.5, I'm pretty sure, out of 40. That's a pretty high score. So I think it deserves it. I think this is in terms of a recommendation, I think it's only an hour and 45 minutes. Like, it's really well paced, and it's I think it is more than just a food movie. Like, I think it's a great character study, great cultural study. And yeah, it's a big recommendation from me.
Yeah, and I think what's also nice about it is it's a bit off the beaten track for people. It's not, like I said earlier, when you say food movies, I named all the ones you'd already done because they're not the obvious choice, but they're the ones that are most sort of in the public consciousness. And so being able to experience a movie like this, which I think, like I said, I'd never even heard of before, hopefully people will resonate and go have a look at it and spend some time watching it and just go, this is a great movie that I'm glad I've now know about.
100%. I think it's definitely a hidden gem that anybody will love. I think anybody can watch it, which is a great thing. And yeah, it's a recommendation. So that's about it, I think. Before we wrap things up, where can my listeners, probably less listeners than you, but where can my listeners go and find your podcast or your work? How can they find you on the internet?
So for my podcast, The Fantastic History of Food is pretty much available on all of the major platforms. I have a website at foodhistorypodcast.com. I'm also on Twitter at foodhistorypod, on Facebook as well, and on Instagram, but I don't really do Instagram as much as I do Twitter and Facebook. But you can just go search for it on any or whatever platform people tend to use. I think I'm about to hit episode 20 now, so I release kind of on a 2-week schedule, just because it's not my full-time job. I do this as a hobby in the evenings, and so the researching takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of stuff there that you can kind of listen to, and I just try to take, for people who don't know it, I just try to find interesting stories from history that somehow involve food. And so it's not necessarily a food history podcast, like what is the history of this cuisine or what is the history of this ingredient. It's more like Hitler during World War II once had a plan to try and monopolize the margarine market, and he did that by potentially trying to go and corral a whole bunch of whales down in Antarctica. So it's crazy, weird stories from history that people maybe have never heard about that somehow involve food. And so that's just a little brief overview.
So good. I think it's such a cool podcast. Like, honestly, what really do you want more from a podcast? Like, you can read history in a book. Like, this is the perfect medium, I think, for those crazy, unique stories. So yeah, I've really enjoyed listening, and I really recommend to my audience to go and find your show.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No worries. Well, thank you again for coming and chatting with me. I think it was such a fun conversation. And
yeah, what a treat.
Yeah. Look, we'll see how we go, but you're always welcome back if we find another movie or something we want to do.
I'm so glad you said that, because hey, look, I don't want to monopolize your time, but down the line, I'd love to come back and do some more cool stuff with you.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, this is not a full-time job for me either, so on that sort of 2-weekly sort of basis, roughly, as well. But I think, I'd love to have you back. So
great, man.
Let's lock in something later.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much. Well, that about does it for this week's episode, a film and food review of Big Night. Thank you again to Nick Charlie Key from the Fantastic History of Food podcast for coming on the show. It was such a great conversation, so thank you again, Nick, for coming on. Again, make sure you listen and subscribe to his podcast. It's full of informative and exciting food history stories that are so well produced, and this is a huge, huge recommendation. You can find all the links to Nick's work on the Fantastic History of Food podcast in the show notes of this week's episode, plus on all of our social medias. But if you can't wait, just search Fantastic History of Food in your podcast player. If you love the Film and Food podcast, why not have coffee with us? Ko-fi is a website that allows fans to donate the price of a coffee to their favourite artists. The Film and Food podcast will always be a labour of love that will be free to everybody who wants to listen to us. But if you would like to support our show and help us in the expenses and keeping this show on the air, then you can donate the price of a coffee to us on our Ko-fi page. The link to that is in the show notes of this week's episode, plus on our social medias. Thank you to all who have generously donated and for supporting the show. If you enjoy this podcast, can I ask you a favour? Can you give this a 5-star rating and review on your podcast platform of choice, preferably Apple Podcasts? We are still a brand new show that are hoping to get into the ears of as many people as possible. And so by you leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, we go up the rankings and get into the ears of people who need to hear our show. Thank you again to Archie Beth, Nonna Eats, and Real Reviews Film for your 5-star reviews and ratings. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. We're on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Castbox, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, Himalaya, Player FM, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Google Play, Deezer, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and SoundCloud. Basically, wherever you find podcasts, we will be there waiting for you. Make sure you email us. The address is fans@filmandfoodpodcast.com. That's fans@filmandfoodpodcast.com. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Film and Food Podcast. Let us know how you went with the recipe. What did you think of Big Night? Give us feedback, suggest a movie to review. The most important thing is to join the conversation. Until next time, goodbye, and thanks for listening.